Great. And so that recording is started. I know it does change the tone and the vibe a little bit to have it be recorded, but we know there are so many people who want to be here and the time just doesn't work for them. And since there is sometimes such a shortage of information resources on unschooling, I hope some of these archived panels can be kind of filling that.
Well, you got some great panelists. Deb and Michelle are fabulous. So I'm sure there'll be some excellent discussion.
Right, we don't want to
I know you guys, you're awesome.
All right, so maybe let's get started. So just to kind of reiterate what Rhiannon had said, we're hoping that if people do have questions, and feel free to really ask, if you can put it in the chat just so that we have the ability to kind of go through them and maybe ask them to the presenters. And before we get started, I did just want to say, if you feel comfortable and you want to do so, I'm going to do mine right now. You can edit your Zoom name to include the name that you want to be called during this programming and your pronouns. That can help us kind of communicate. And I also just wanted to say, we just talked about this in the resource share that we had, but even though we have the format of having panelists here, we just got done with this great conversation about this. We know that can sometimes elevate people as being experts on a thing, but that we're all just kind of, right, we're all learning and growing and we're all kind of in this together, and that some of us have that expertise of years of wisdom, and that is a certain type of expertise, but that every person's family is different, and so we hope that people can take out of this something that feels really right and relevant for you, and know that this is something that is a very decentralized process, that there is not that sort of book of expertise that we're drawing from, but that still we can utilize the wisdom of people who have been doing this for many years and have thought a lot about it and have, done their own work on this and a further along path than maybe people who are new or starting out on the journey. But feel free, anyone, to ask any questions. You don't have to be an unschooling parent to ask. You don't have to be new to the journey to ask. And so I was hoping maybe panelists could introduce themselves, say a little bit about what we're doing here. And Robin, if you kind of want to maybe introduce the sort of idea of the Big Six and what the categories are, since it was sort of your brainchild labeling them that way. And then
gladly. I'm going to say about 2004, 2006, some time ago, when my daughter was tiny and I was on a lot of different boards and email lists, I noticed that the same questions kept cropping up over and over and over, and they ended up kind of falling into 6 categories. So I started calling them the Big Six, and these are not the academic side of things, which have their whole own questions. These were questions about parenting and unschooling as a lifestyle, as a whole lifestyle. And this is across every kind of interface, because Facebook wasn't the same thing as it is now. It was on email lists, it was on the old boards, which are not a thing anymore, and it was also the kinds of questions that cropped up in different conferences, which the conferences were all just kind of brand new at that point. And they were, the Big Six were, now I better remember them: sleep, food, chores, gaming, media, and a category that I've kind of called personal care, that lumps in a whole bunch of stuff. So it's like the worst one, is it's toothbrushing, taking medicine, wearing clothes parents don't like, a desire to experiment with makeup, all the stuff that have to do with like personal expression and personal care. And so I just kind of called it personal care and lumped it all together. And that was them. And as far as I can see, nothing has changed. They are still the same. If someone is talking about something other than what is traditionally an academic issue, their questions are, 99% of the questions are in that area. And just briefly, my approach to answering questions as an unschooling mom is to talk about things that I've experienced, and talk about in terms of, when that happened with my kid, who is Jane, I did this. And I really try to avoid getting involved in discussions of issues that I have no interest in. Like if you've got 5 boys and you have a question, I'm not going to answer that probably. I really am not. I'm going to stick with questions about that I have something useful to add because I've been through it. And that's that's my philosophy, and that you'll probably find that here too. I'm not talking theoretically. I really am talking from the point of view of things that have happened with my daughter, who is now 20, always unschooled, in case you don't know Jane, always unschooled, currently on the dean's list. First time in a classroom, and she's in a classroom with doing an associate's of fine arts degree in a classroom with master's degree students, and she's still rocking it and is loving who I didn't realize after a lifetime of unschooling that she was going to turn out to be Hermione Granger. There she is. And so from our point of view, unschooling has worked from pretty much every measure, every possible measure, pretty much. It's not a panacea for every problem in the world. That's a misunderstanding that some people come into it with. But it does provide a framework for handling problems that might make them less dire in the world. And I've talked long enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Deb and Michelle, would you like to introduce yourselves briefly?
Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm Deb. My husband, Rick, is around here somewhere because there's a lot of people in here, so they don't all fit on the screen. I work full-time as a senior software test engineer and have pretty much all of our son Joshua's life. He is always unschooled. He is now 22. And Rick has been the at-home parent for most of the time, pretty much that whole time, which made for some really interesting situations when you got the two of them who have matching brains home all day, getting into things while I wasn't here to supervise. Fortunately, Joshua, it was a very good adult supervision for his father. And yeah, he was the one who checked to make sure the hose was nearby when Dad wanted to start a fire in the backyard. So yeah, so there is that. So it's very interesting. And like Robin said, I'm not likely to jump in on a question about what do we do with the 6 kids wanting to go in 6 directions, because we've got 1. And so, yeah, I can maybe kind of, because I've got 2 siblings, but yeah, not so much. So, there is that. Okay, Michelle, off to you.
Okay, I'm Michelle. I have my spouse William, which some of you know, that you've seen them at conferences. And then we have a 16-year-old who will be 17 in a couple months, who's never been to school, has always been unschooled. And we also have a 4.5-year-old who has not had any kind of school thus far. And yeah, unless I can relay, I guess, an experience from another unschooling family, I probably won't answer anything if it's really out of my lane. So yeah, that's it.
I hope there aren't a whole bunch of people with 7 or 8 children here hoping for a lot at answers. Well, we can do our best. That's all we can do.
We'll do our best.
Yeah,
do our best.
I think basically we can at least ask some questions to get to some underlying principles to think about.
Yes, yes. The tent poles of unschooling. Right.
Well, thank you guys. I'm going to open the floor up to, again, I would prefer these be sent through the chat just to make things go a little bit more smoothly for everyone, and that way we can always reference back to what the original question was. So any questions you might have, please type them into the chat and we will read them out to the panelists.
Can I speak?
Yeah, Robin, please.
Oh, sorry.
Type.
I just want to say that I am completely willing, if anybody wants to contact me afterwards, to follow up on a question, because just because there's so little time,
Yes,
I'm happy to speak to people. I will try and get back quickly. If you send me an email, I actually prefer email because I'm an old lady instead of other stuff. But I also like email because then you have a written record of what the question was and there's less confusion. That being said, hopefully it's not much time, but hopefully we can cover at least a few things, but we probably can't cover everything in great depth. But
yeah,
I talk too much. I'll be quiet.
I think one of the things maybe that can, because we don't have a lot of times, one of the things that I've found helpful in general is when I come up to, you know, a thing about food or sleep or whatever, I find asking myself why.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I think that? Why do I think this is a should, this is a have to? Why? If I can ask myself why, and I start having to go around in circles to explain it to myself, then maybe that's not really a should.
Yeah.
That's not really a have to, because I can't explain why to my own self. It's just a thing that's stuck in my head because I was told I should do that, or I shouldn't do that, or I should think this. So if you can, if we start running out of time and you run into something, you start, just ask yourself why. Why do I think this? And you can often get at the heart of what's going on, and then go, okay, well, I think that because my grandma told me that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great
And
thing.
maybe it doesn't have to, kind of like the story of the pot roast. Do you guys know the story of the pot roast?
Please tell us.
There was this, it's been circulating forever and ever. There was a person who cut her pot roast in half and put it in 2 pans and put it in the oven. Her husband asked why. And she said, I don't know. That's the way my mom cooks pot roast. And so they called mother-in-law and said, why do you cut the pot roast in half and put it in 2 pans? And she said, I don't know. That's the way my mom always did it. So they called grandma, and grandma said, oh, that's because I never had a pan big enough to cook a pot roast for the whole family. So I always cut it in half.
Gosh.
That was the only reason. That 3 generations were cutting their pot roast in half. That's the only reason. There was no why to it.
I'm going to interrupt you here real quick, Deb, because we have some questions from the chat. We have one from Rachel Smart. She asks, how do you balance the desire to let your kid or teen regulate their own video game time and learning time when they end up choosing to only play video games and not do any school learning?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Robin.
Okay, you got it. Speaking as my daughter is actually studying game design, has been a gamer all her life, has spoken at numerous conferences on the topic of video gaming specifically. The principle under here that you're kind of still learning as someone presumably moving into unschooling is that there is no difference between video game time and learning time. In unschooling, everything counts as learning time, or nothing counts as learning time, it's just time. The idea behind unschooling is that children learn automatically through their activities and interactions with daily life. And the purpose of unschooling is to create an environment where children can blossom into who they're meant to be, and will to create a fantastic relationship between the parents and the children, so that their whole life is one of asking questions of each other, and so that there's no fights over you aren't doing your schoolwork. There is no school learning in unschooling, and yet magically, it's not really magically, but it feels that way sometimes, children do learn to read, they do learn how to do arithmetic, they do learn concepts that fit into all kinds of school subjects, and sometimes they fit into multiple school subjects, and they do that through following their interests. Video gaming is a really big interest in the modern age, and it's not going to go away, except if a child feels like they're sort of done with it. And that happens sometimes. People want to take a break from video gaming for their own reasons, because they found some other way they want to use their time, because they've got another interest that may take them away from it. But their interest is not necessarily going to look like school learning. If your child is choosing to play video games, the answer to that is to facilitate and help them play video games for as long as they want to. And that sometimes looks like bringing them snacks to where they are, asking them how they're doing, watching them play games if they want to, because a lot of kids, my daughter was this way, and I know a lot of other kids are, they love it when their parents just sit and watch them. Ugh, it's not always interesting. Oh my God. when Jane was very little, she wanted me to play for her so that she could watch me. And she then it gradually morphed into I do the boring parts and she does the fun parts.
That's what Rick had to do a
Yeah.
lot of times, because there were particular games where the fun stuff in the multiplayer mode could only be accessed if you went through the single player stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
exactly.
he didn't like the single player stuff. But Rick would grind his way through the boring parts to get to the fun parts. I couldn't do that. I can't watch the games. I get nauseous.
Well, then you see that is, I'll just say that's a great introduction to something. That's a real life, non-arbitrary limitation for you.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
can't do it because it makes you sick. But doesn't mean that everybody shouldn't do it. You know, people sometimes mix up a kind of, they say, culture says, society says, with a real life personal and individual reason for either doing something or not doing something. That's a whole other
and that doesn't mean that I just cut that off.
No, exactly.
My job was to keep track of, hey, the next game in that series is going to be in the store on Tuesday. Do you want to get it now or do you want to wait until the price drops?
Exactly.
It's about reading. He came down one time and said I was the coolest mom because I was sitting there reading Game Informer to find out about the games, about who made the games, about the music in the games. It doesn't have to be watching them necessarily.
No. You're demonstrating the other principle, which is develop a passion and fascination with what your children are interested in to try and understand why it's their fascination, even if it's not something that you dig.
And what was an interesting side effect of that, and not just saying, no, I can't do that, but at 6, 7 years old, he had learned enough empathy and compassion to say, Mom, I really want to play with you. And I know you can't play, but this game lets us set up these parameters. And so, instead of having indoor spaces, it was an outdoor space. So there wasn't a lot of busy dizzy. And it could set a timer for like 10 minutes so that we would just play until the timer went off in that scenario. And so I could play with him for 10 minutes in this kind of situation. And so he learned that was good for mom, that he could do something that helped mom at that age. He could understand that.
Yeah. I've also helped a lot of parents figure out how to change the settings on Minecraft so it's not so dizzy making, because there are certain like settings for the point of view that even for me, and I play Minecraft all the time with my kids, and I finally figured out, like, oh, the reason I feel nauseous while playing this is the point of view settings, and I can change those. And that's changed a lot of things for a lot of parents who are like, I really want to play this, but I just get like nauseous every time I see it, happening. And
you'll have to make a tutorial of how to do that.
It's not very difficult. I just didn't know it existed for like a couple of years into play.
Oh no. There's one other little thing in that one question, and that is the word regulate. Regulate their own video game time. A lot of people come into unschooling with the belief that if they just give it a bit of time, children will self-regulate into a schedule that looks like doing math for an hour in the morning and then doing this other subject, that they will magically regulate their own time into looking like school.
Right.
That won't happen for the vast majority of people. And if it does happen, that's just how a kid is. And
part of that too is that self-regulate idea that the adults often have is they will eventually do this to the level that I'm comfortable with.
Right.
Right.
That their self-regulating has to look like my self-regulating, and I'm only good with 10 minutes of video games. And so my kid will eventually only do 10 minutes of video games. And that's not the way it goes.
The word regulate, that's the problem, because that carries with it a host of assumptions that I encourage anybody who thinks that they should be regulating their time to just look at those assumptions. It was what you were saying about asking why. There are things in that. But in terms of working out how long they need to spend, they're going to spend how much they need to spend to reach certain goals. It's not an arbitrary time. It's not going to take a person X amount of hours to reach a goal. It's going to take every person a different amount of time to reach a goal, because everyone's different when they're playing, and sometimes they want to do things again, and the goals are different and whatever else.
Right. And that is the social aspect too, because most, not everyone, but most people who are really into video games at some point are playing games with people, and presumably usually friends that they know. And there's that component to it. So they're, working as a team and socializing with friends, and which is a big part of it for a lot of kids. Like if, especially if their friends are not all like in the same neighborhood or the same city, like it's how they're able to
the same state
hang out with them,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, Joshua, and it was just happened to be because of the particular game he was playing, he was actually up in the middle of the night because one of the people on the group, the team or whatever that game called it at the time, was in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
So he learned at an early age to calculate time zones to figure out when that other person was going to be able to play. And then after a couple of years, that game wasn't as much fun for him anymore, and so they didn't play together. That was that. But yeah, there's all sorts of other things kind of going on at the same time.
I'm gonna move on to the next question now, if that's all right with you guys, just so that we have time to answer everyone's. Thank you so much for those thoughts, though. Those are really great. Rachel, I'm gonna come back to your second question. I'm gonna move on to Sharon's first. Sharon made an edit on it, and I will read both the original and then the edit. She asks, as to exposing them to stuff outside of their comfort zone, how much do you push them out of that comfort zone without forcing? For example, my kids have no desire to go outside, but sometimes when I urge them to go and they do, they seem to be glad they did. And then she edited, and she says, by outside of comfort zone, I mean, sorry, the chat's moving. I mean, string things that they've never been exposed to before. They tend to resist anything new, but sometimes when they do accept it, they're pleased that they did.
And before we all jump in on answering that really quick, I'll let you digest that for 1 second. Rhiannon and I just did the Zoom version of passing notes under the desk and thought I would extend this to 90 minutes. This is our first year organizing, and obviously our first year organizing a Zoom conference, but it's seeming like time-wise that it would be maybe better to have this be the same length as a regular panel. So just wanted to put that out there. We will go to 90 minutes if that's okay with panelists as well.
I'm fine with that. I've got 2 hours. I left myself open for 2 hours.
Awesome, great. If you can stick around for the full 90 minutes.
I'm still waiting for 3 p.m. I'm okay.
As one of the things that, because you threw the word strewing in there, but one of the things is not so much throwing purple at someone who loves green, but find fuchsia and say, hey, I found this thing. It's kind of similar to purple. And then just put it there and see if they're interested.
Yeah.
It may be 2 months and they go, hey, yeah, that looks really cool. Or they might say, no, I want more green stuff.
Yeah.
And then your job is to say, okay, well, I found green, and I found green tea, and I found green leaves, and I found green t-shirts, and I found the green lantern, and I found the green hornet, and I found all these other green related things. And and that's where they're going to go. And again, this comes back to asking the question, why? Why are you offering that thing? Is it because it's a priority for you, or it's a priority in society saying kids are supposed to do this? Kids should go outside for X amount of hours per day because they should. Well, why? I've got a kid who does not like bugs, does not like sweat, does not like getting grubby. And
when
so
did Jane move in with you?
Yeah, exactly. It's just and it is, and and there were some times when we were like, oh, we're going out back to the fire pit that you helped build from stones that were pulled up when they were rebuilding our deck. We're going to go out and have marshmallows out there. Do you want to come? And then he might say yes, or he might say, well, can I open the bag of marshmallows and stay inside? Okay, we're going outside. If you want to join us, join us. And we'd go out and sit there and roast marshmallows because that's what we wanted to do. It wasn't about us making him do something whether or not he wanted to, because that was my priority, was going out there and having marshmallows and making s'mores, because chocolate is life. But and sometimes he would come out and sometimes he wouldn't, but it was his choice of what to do.
Exactly. Yeah,
not because we decided he should want to go make s'mores.
Yeah, my teenager is not one to leave the house. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that we're talking about the pandemic, he wouldn't actually have noticed we weren't supposed to leave the house. I mean, after a while, he might have been like, I noticed you all are here a lot. But I was just gonna say, yeah. So offering things and saying, I'm gonna go do this thing. If you want to come with me, I'd love to have your company. And also taking things that he likes, like we're big into playing board games and tabletop games. And it was like, hey, let's have a change of scenery. Let's pack up some games that we want to play and do it at the coffee shop or something like that. So it was like, we're out of the house, we're seeing other people, but we're still doing the things that he wants to do. So that's the thing that we would do. And of course, if he said no and didn't want to go, well, okay, fine, we'll go and we'll leave you home, But yeah, so that's one of the things. We just always include people that are in our house, whether they live here or they're here visiting. Hey, we're going to do this thing. You're welcome to join us. If not, hang out here and do whatever. And, sometimes the teenager, would bite and come along, and sometimes he'd be like, no, I'm fine doing what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, Jane is someone who has never been comfortable with change. Transitions have always been a challenge for her, and this is a temperament thing that started when she was an infant and is still the same. So that's one thing, is to look at your kids' temperaments. Don't think of them all as a unit. Think of them as individuals. Some of them are going to be more acceptant of a certain amount of pushing, like suggestions you're making, and others are going to be really, really resistant, no matter how good the suggestion is. I used to describe Jane as, she will not be pulled, she will not be pushed, even in the direction she wants to go. So the best way to make sure she doesn't want to do something that she'd enjoy is to start insisting on it. So there is a point. And of course, I'm not very good at being silent, as you may notice. So that's my challenge. I was given a child that needed me to be different from who I am a lot, and that's okay. But I want to talk about a kind of a principle that I think might apply to this. I want you to think of what you're doing with your children is that you're building a tower of trust that's made of bricks and mortar. And every now and then you can pull out a single brick, pushing them to do something out of their comfort zone once or twice, because you really know that they're going to dig it once they get there. And without stopping at the point of forcing, that's what I would say. But you can pull out the occasional brick, versus building a Jenga tower where you're constantly pulling things out and putting them on top, and eventually it's going to fall down, because that's the nature of a Jenga tower. So when you're with your children and thinking of your relationship, build a tower of bricks and mortar, not a tower of wooden Jenga sticks.
Kind of like the saying, is this the hill I want to die on?
That's another, Oh, there's a kitty cat, I think. It's either a kitty cat or a duster. I got my cat.
Sorry.
It's kind of like, I heard it described at one of the conferences at some point. You know that cornstarch goop that you can make, where it's basically cornstarch and water.
Yeah.
And it's really messy. And if you put it in your hands and just stand there very gently, like you're holding an egg, it kind of goops through your fingers, and it just kind of flows and kind of goes. And you can actually shift your hands and move the direction a little bit and stuff like that. As soon as you tighten up, that stuff isn't going anywhere. Yeah. You can put it on the table and push it, and it's not going anywhere. And as soon as you release the pressure, it starts flowing again, and you can kind of direct it a little bit, but you can't push it because it won't go anywhere. And I know with Joshua, that's exactly what it was.
Push your finger through slowly. Yes, exactly.
It's like, and even when he was really little, and there were things that needed to happen, and we couldn't leave him home. There wasn't anyone to leave him home. It's like, okay, this is something that we need to do. Because a lot of times what we say is, you need to go with us. No, that's not it. They don't need to go with us. They'd rather stay home.
It's your need, not their need.
yeah, it's my need. I need to go do this. Dad needs to come too, because whatever. How can we make this work?
Yep.
Even at 3 and 4 years old, it's like,
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
what if, for example, and I'll give you an example that, may or may not resonate with some folks. When he was really little, very often there it is, non-Newtonian liquids, that's it. Very often on Sunday mornings when we were going to church, he didn't want to go. Understandable. But very often I would have responsibilities and Rick would have responsibilities. And so we needed to be there. And he was 4 or 5. He couldn't stay home alone. And it was a half-hour drive. And cell phones were not a thing. So there was no way we could leave him with a cell phone and go 5 minutes down the road. So it's like, what would help make this better? And one of the things that helped, and those of you who maybe are in from a more conservative tradition are going to go, oh, but he had his Game Boy and Pokemon and a headset. And he would sit there with that. And as long as me sitting next to him couldn't hear it, no one else is going to hear it either. And so he would sit there gaming for the entire time that we were there. And as there were times when people who didn't know us as well, people who knew us, people there had known us for years, and they'd just like, yeah, whatever, it's them. But there were people who didn't know us as well or might be visiting or whatever, and they'd look over and they'd see him sitting there with his game in the middle of church, and they'd look, and I'd look back at them and put my arm around him and smile, and then pointedly turn back to pay attention to what we're supposed to be listening to at the time.
So you're modeling the correct behavior for the other
adults. And he was a lot quieter than the kids dropping their crayons and coloring books and stuff. But there was a point to that. Oh, but what it did was make this thing that we needed to do doable for him in that circumstance. And gradually over years, I might point out, like, hey, this is your favorite song we're about to sing. Do you want to take the headset off? And sometimes he did, and sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he was in the middle of capturing a Pokemon, and that's important.
Yeah.
But I think that I actually got around to an important thing. Looking at their wants, their needs, their desires as equivalent to the things we need and want is really foundational.
Yeah.
If my need to go do something trumps his because he's a kid, that's not going to cut it, because you're going to get pushback.
Yeah.
But if we built up that brick and mortar tower saying, look, I know you don't want to do this, but I've built up that tower of trust. It's like, you don't want to do this. Can you trust me that I'm going to do everything I can to make this doable for you?
Right.
And that's best to start young too, as you did. I mean, a lot of people are coming into unschooling a little older. Their kids have been in school for a while, and sometimes it's tougher, but it's really worth making that effort. Unschooling parents, one thing that makes them stand out from many parents, I hate to sound snobbish about it, but we really do put a tremendous amount of energy, mental energy and physical energy, into finding alternative solutions. We don't just stick with the most obvious solution or the traditional advice. And this is where people say it's simple but not easy. The not easy part is the amount of attention and thinking and reconsidering things that you might say or do. It's just constant, and it goes on forever. You don't there's never a point where you're actually deschooled from your own upbringing, unless you're a second generation unschooler, in which case you probably already
it'll show up in the oddest places, like that year that you did this really cool thing in school.
Yeah.
When your kid hits that age, you're like, I'm depriving my kid of doing this really cool thing. Well, they may not have, they don't care at all about that thing, but
they do different things in school now too, anyhow, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
old. We did some cool things, so yeah.
I'm old too. Your other relationships, in trying to meet everyone's needs, including yours, when you're not even just when your children aren't part of the picture, but you know, friends and family and stuff, and trying to like navigate thinking nonlinear and being creative in problem solving. Absolutely. And I will admit that at the end of the day, there have been times where I'm like, I need to do this thing, and I can't think of a way to make you happy about having to come with me. So we're just going to get ice cream when we're done.
That's it. Sometimes
That's the best you can do.
Yep.
I don't
I'm going to interrupt.
Sorry.
To move on to the next question real quick.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
That's okay.
We'll keep talking forever.
And James,
I think you're breaking up.
I think we lost Rhiannon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Emmett, help.
Oh no. Not sure which question Rhiannon was about to read.
I don't know
I
either.
don't know. But let me talk quickly while she's gone, and she'll be back in a second. I had a technique for helping Jane with transitions when she was little. Oh, well, I'll stop now and leave you all on tenterhooks because here's Rhiannon back.
sorry about that.
No, it's not back. It's still.
So Rachel had asked, what do you do if and when your own personal anxieties creep in and make you feel pressure to push your children to do something they are not currently interested in doing? And Rachel was particularly interested in the mental emotional process as the parent who is having their own insecurity. How does one manage that so it doesn't come out like something like coercion directed at the child, such as feeling frustrated that the child isn't interested in helping in a household task when the parent is feeling overwhelmed about all that they feel needs to be done?
Go have a cup of tea.
Gradually and over time, and don't beat yourself up. But the question to ask every time is the action or the thing I'm about to say going to harm or help my relationship with my child?
Yeah.
If you make that your rubric, it's a lot easier. And please know that everybody feels anxious, especially if their mother-in-law is coming to visit. Trust me, the anxieties will get easier. And my mantra became actually very quickly, I'm not worried. And that was when people ask me things, because a lot of this is coming from outside. You think it's personal anxieties, maybe it is. If you can always find someone, an individual to talk to, whether that's someone, an unschooling friendly therapist, I recommend Roya, or another unschooling mentor, another mom who's been down the path already, or a list where the people on the list have children who are older than yours, so you're actually getting advice from people who've been there. Deal with your own stuff. Don't make it your kid's fault, number one. Number two, it's not the unschooling, it's the something else a lot of the time. And the other thing is, give yourself a break. We all have these anxious moments. They always come back. Even the person, myself, my daughter's 20, I still have moments where I think that, gee, I wish I'd done that differently because maybe today she wouldn't be so cranky with me or something.
Yeah.
And
that's a good reason to go have a cup of tea, because you can't say something to your kid that's going to pressure them if you've got a mouthful of tea and you really
exactly
like this. Go have a cup. By the time you heat the water, steep the tea, and drink it, it gives you time to think. And if you don't like tea, that's fine.
Something else, yeah.
Something else. Fine. You know, if you like to knit, go pull out your knitting project and knit a couple rows while you think through what it is and why you think that.
Yeah.
Take a walk around the block. Wear your mask. Take a walk around the block.
Bounce on the trampoline. Do something.
And I also think it's important that if you've been doing this a while and you've built up that trust, if your kid asks you like to do something and your initial reaction is like, oh no, that's an awful idea. If you pause and you say, I want to think about that. I'm not going to give you an answer right now. Let me go have 10, 15 minutes to think about that, to think through by yourself, what is your hang up? Like, what is your worst case scenario? Like, why are you like initially knee jerk going, oh gosh, no. And think about that and then come back and say, okay, I thought about it and I was concerned about these things. I realized that some of the things on my list of concern are like kind of ridiculous and a non-issue. But you know, if you still have hangups, say these are my hangups. Help me feel better about this.
Mhm.
Yes, you're talking about something they're not currently interested in doing. That's a quote from this question, and there's a magic word in there, and that is currently,
Mhm.
because there's always yet. They're not interested in reading chapter books yet.
Yet.
They're not interested in doing something yet, because everybody comes to things at different times.
Yeah.
They're not interested in cleaning up yet. My daughter used to be one of those not interested in stuff yet, and now she is so protective of her own laundry that I'm not allowed to even take it into her room for her if it's in the washing machine, or the dryer, I should say. So she's become very, she takes responsibility for all her own stuff. And there was a time when I was thinking, she never will. Oh my God. But it's still yet. And in terms of anything to do with academic ideas, again, let it go. All learning is learning.
Right.
And I can tell you that in terms of, say, reading, I don't believe, and you know, I could be wrong in terms of individuals, but I don't think there's been a case where someone has reported that their adult, formerly unschooled child didn't learn to read eventually, for example, in the absence of some kind of, say, medical condition or whatever, something that was really an outlier. And I'm just saying that to cover my ass because I don't know. But so far, as far as I know, there haven't been any reports of that. So eventually and yet are two things to think about.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is, and I mean, I haven't really discussed this too much with people from like wildly divergent cultures around the world, but I think part of it is our American do-it-yourself kind of mindset, where we have an expectation in our society that by the time they're 7, children should be able to go and do these things by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's not necessarily going to cut it. Again, you know, it goes back to the other things about introducing them to new things.
Mm-hmm.
When Joshua was really little, I was like, okay, I'm going to put a movie on and fold laundry. Do you want to come watch a movie with me? And while we were watching the movie and I'm doing this, I'd say, here, can you sort these socks so that they match? And maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. I'm still going to be doing the laundry anyway. But it wasn't him having to do it alone. It wasn't him having to. Now, at the same time, it wasn't me telling him, because I know somebody who, as an adult, needed to clean her room and didn't know how to do it because she was required to do it as a kid, but her mom would stand there and say, okay, do this next, do this next, do this next, and basically gave her step-by-step instructions on how to clean her room.
It's amazing how step-by-step instructions have the exact opposite effect of what you're hoping for.
Because when she got to be, because she was living in our house for a while she was trying to find a job and needed a place near to where she was looking. And it got to be, you know, early summer and she needed a window fan put in because we don't have AC. And we couldn't get from the door to the window because of the stuff. And so I said, if you want a fan in there, because it's going to get hot within the next day or two, you're going to need to clean this room. And I mean, she's an adult. I'm going to use that word. She should be able to at least make a path through her stuff. And she went up, she said, okay. And she came back down about 20 minutes later saying, I don't know what to do.
Oh, poor lady.
Now, she was given chores. She was required to clean her room. And she said, I don't know what to do. Well, I had known her since she was 5 months old. So I said, okay, you're a Girl Scout, right? She said, yeah. I said, okay, when one of the Girl Scouts loses their bracelet in the middle of the field, what do you do? And she said, oh, we make a line and we grid it off and we all walk down the line looking for it. I said, okay, grid off your room and do one grid at a time and make a pile. Take a trash bag. This is trash. This goes into the next grid because I'm going to deal with that later, and so on. You know, this is keep, this is trash, goes over here. And then she worked, and about 2 hours later, she came down, her room was clean. because now she had something that she could use going forward to work with. It wasn't me telling her how to do it. 'Cause I'm like, I'm going to give you a suggestion. This works. Or you could go, 'cause I usually clean circular. I start here and go to here and go to here and go to here and work my way around, bringing stuff with me as I go until I get back to the beginning again. So I said, you can do it this way, or you can do it this way, whatever. But if you want a fan, you're going to have to do something.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
she had some tools now, which is one of the things we want our kids to have as grownups, is not so much rules to work by as tools to live with.
Exactly. That's a great
Yeah.
way of putting it. I love that it took you like one conversation that it took her mom however many years to fail to teach her something.
Well, I know her mom too. I've
Learned
known her
from
mom
you
for a long time.
in
So
a very brief moment.
yeah, it was just
Fun
give her
conversation.
something that she could hold on to make it her own. And she
Um,
did. She did it how she wanted, and it was hers.
Something in our house that we've done with, people helping out, because I think that was one of the questions about, getting kids to help with chores and things. Well, first, we have the rule, and this is for everyone in our house: don't ask someone to help you with something if you're not okay with the answer no. Because, I ask, my spouse things. Sometimes I'm like, hey, can you do this thing for me? And sometimes it's no. Sometimes it's a not right now. When I do X, Y, Z, then yeah. Or can we do it later? But I've never asked the kids to do anything that I wasn't okay with them saying no. Like, if you are expecting them to go along with it, then you're not asking them to help you. Like, you're basically just phrase it as, I need you to do this now.
Yeah.
And not, will you come and, I don't know, take the trash out or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, take the trash out. Hey, that's one of those things. Because
Jane won't do that. It causes her like anxiety, but she gets the trash in her own room into a bag and leaves it for me. So
yeah, there you go.
we've worked out a system that works for us.
Exactly. We've got Joshua, there are things that you want done and things you need done. And there are things that you are going to ask for help with.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that this needs to, last spring, last April, and those of you who were at last year's conference probably noticed it, Rick had his hip replaced.
Mm-hmm.
And so last summer, I'm working full time. He's recovering from hip surgery, and we've got a lawn that needed mowing desperately.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua, we need you to do this. And he'd already had practice at it because he and Rick would trade off. Like Rick would do half, like do the front, and Joshua would do the back. So he knew how it worked because we brought him alongside us.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't just throw it at him. We brought him alongside through the years. The first time he tried, he was maybe 8 and didn't know that the little thing on the lawnmower makes it go faster.
Ooh.
And so if you squeeze it, the lawnmower takes off, and if you just hold it a little bit, it just kind of goes slowly because it's one of those drive things. And so he was about 8, and he grabs on the handle, and the lawnmower took off, and he was wise enough to just let go, and it stopped itself. But as he got bigger and he could handle it, he learned to manage it. And so now he'll get up and he'll look outside and he'll look, he's 22 now, so he's had some years of practice, and he'll look outside and go, the lawn's getting long. Have you checked the weather forecast? I said, no, I haven't. And he'll check the weather forecast, find out which is the nicest day of the next 3 or 4, and say, okay, on Tuesday, I'm going to mow the lawn. And okay, fine. And Tuesday morning, he gets up, eats breakfast, and then, because I'm still, I'm working, and all of a sudden, I'll hear the lawnmower start. I'm going, oh, it must be Tuesday, because that's when he's doing the lawn. And so it's not about us yeah, exactly. There it is. Breaking things down and taking our expectation of how it's supposed to look out of the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
The way my kid is going to handle this is not the way I'm going to handle it. But you know what? It's eventually going to get done. Or I'll say, you know what? I have a thing about how this gets done. I need this. I need the shirt. Like when we got married, Rick didn't like the way I folded t-shirts. So he would fold all the t-shirts until I learned the proper way to do it. And
Oh, I would
we're both
learn the proper
grown-ups.
way in that situation.
We're both grown-ups, and there really isn't a proper way, but he had a thing about how it needed to be. And so it's like, okay, you can do it.
All right, I'm gonna interrupt you guys there real quick. Just want to let you know we have one more question in the chat, and then we'll probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions after that if anyone has any further thoughts that they'd like addressed. Our next question is from James. I don't believe he's in the chat anymore, but because this is recorded, I'd like to answer it anyway in case he wants to reference back to it later. He asked, I play all the time with my kids. My concern as a parent is to developing a balance to address the other 5 if games or something else seems to be detrimentally out of balance. He gave an example of they begin focusing on hygiene so much they become concerned with attractiveness, etc., setting themselves up for primary acceptance or rejection for others. So they're focusing so much on that that they're just ignoring everything else.
Sounds like he's trying to form some kind of structured balance between all the big 6, as if they were a thing that everybody has, a goal that people have to reach is balance between the big 6. I'm a little confused by his question, to be honest. It's not this. That's not what the big 6 are. They aren't signposts you have to reach or aspects of life. They're just the kinds of questions that people ask most. Everybody has different things that they're most concerned about. Some people have no issues whatsoever with sleep with their kids. They never have a question. They're perfectly happy. It's not that you play games to the exclusion of, what did he say? Personal care aspect. It's that different issues come up at different times, and just by here's the sneaky thing about the big 6 is that there actually aren't 6 separate issues. You will notice if you listen to the answers that everything gets answered by answering one. It's the principles, it's all linked together, just like the sneaky thing with the academic side, as it were, is that it's all everything, one question, one answer answers all questions. But if you're concerned about the idea that your child is going to grow up to be overly invested in their personal experience, you are doing something that people often do when their kids are young, which is borrow trouble from a non-existent future.
Yes.
And you know what? What's the worst thing that can happen? You have a kid that is attentive to their personal hygiene.
That's another good question that people try to avoid or work around, but sometimes actually I think somebody talked about going deep into some things, going head on into what's the worst that can happen, and step yourself through. What's the worst that can happen if? Well, then this. Okay, well, then what about that? Okay, well, then this. Okay, well, then what about that?
Or is it absolutely true?
Yeah, is this thing that I'm worried about absolutely true? And if so, what's next? For example, I've got a 22-year-old male. You know what happens when they hit about 12 or 13?
They take long showers.
They get stinky if they don't take showers.
They won't leave the show. Yeah.
And so part of parenting is not only giving them space to be themselves, but also giving them tips on, like, it's been about 2 weeks since you showered and we're going to visit grandma in 3 days and she's going to want to hug you. You might want to plan somewhere in the next 3 days to wash up. And what that looks like, it might be taking, some wipes to the stinkier parts, or it might be taking a shower. For example, Joshua does not like water in his face, which I totally get because I don't like water in my face. I have a towel hanging over the shower rod, so as soon as I wash my face, I can dry it. And so what we did was get a handheld shower head so that he could put it at whatever, he could dangle it down and aim it so that he could shower without getting his face all wet the whole time. And then he could just wash his face and be done. And so that's another one of those, finding an alternative solution to the situation. I love it, especially when my hair is purple, because that way I can turn that water really cold to make the dye last and just do my
Yeah,
hair
that's
and
a
not
good
all the
idea.
rest of me.
Yeah.
But again, that was not limiting his gaming or whatever else he wanted to do. But at the same time, he would take a shower when he needed a shower. But it was based on his need, his timing, his plans, his choices. I was just giving him some guidelines like, grandma's going to hug you and you're starting to get a little ripe because it's the middle of July. We're giving him the social information that he may or may not have caught on to because, how many times does he go hug grandma?
Yeah. So I'm looking at this question again, and it just occurs to me, aside from I totally agree with everything you said about being a coach and a guide rather than a boss or an authoritarian sort of person. This question about setting themselves up for primary acceptance or rejection from others. And I think there's some underlying fears happening there. And this is actually, it's funny because this is a type of question that I've seen mostly from fathers for some reason. And I don't know why that would be the case, but it's something that, first of all, you have to understand that, and I encourage people to read about child development from like the science and understand that there are developmental milestones, and some of those milestones involve when human beings naturally turn from their parents being the primary focus of all of their attention to their peers and their friends. And one of the things that unschoolers, one of the underlying goals, maybe it's not talked about so much when the children are little, but the underlying goal is that even in the natural development of turning to other people for their social life and their validation and their interests, and parents, the relationship with their parents stays strong in the background as a kind of a foundation or a bulwark. We aren't raising children that can hardly wait to leave us,
Right.
hopefully. And if you are, James, if you're playing with your kids all the time, stop worrying about balance or anything else. Just play with your kids, play with them, pursue their interests. Don't expect them to play with you all the time. You play with them, if that makes sense. And you will be forging the foundation, that tower of trust, the foundation of a really solid relationship, wherefrom they can stand at the top of that tower and look out, and rather than setting themselves up for primary acceptance or rejection, they're going to be looking for really high quality friends and other relationships, because that you have taught them what a great relationship looks like by the way you interact with them and by the way you interact with their other adults in their life. I don't want to assume that it's a mom, but they're other parents or caregivers or people that are in their family. And they will be going out there and going, it's unschooling kids that know most of the time pretty quickly if somebody is not living up to their expectations of what a good friend is. And I mean, everybody, unfortunately, is going to experience rejection. They're going to like someone that doesn't like them back, and that is unfortunate. But most of the time, the goal of unschooling is to build people who have enough self-esteem and enough strength in their relationships that it doesn't destroy them. Again, unschooling isn't a panacea. People do have emotional problems of different kinds, unfortunately, but you're just giving them a better chance. The odds are more strongly in their favor.
Yeah.
And that is what I would say. And you know what? Kids go through stages of attractiveness, I think. My daughter used to be like so much about makeup all the time. It's a real hobby with her. She loves it still. But when she gets up to do her Zoom classes, she doesn't put on makeup because she's worried about how her colleagues in class will look at her. She keeps it for when she's going out to do something special now and at 20. So, no, she's still, I don't think she doesn't seem to worry about it. She does a lot of shrugging. Oh, well, they don't like me. Oh, well.
Robin, someone you had mentioned an author, and someone in the chat had requested that if you remembered who it was, I didn't want to cut you off, but didn't want it to get too far away. If you wouldn't
And
mind just typing.
author. What author? Did I
Yeah,
mention an author?
I don't think
It
you
might have
did.
had something to do with developmental stages or
Yeah,
something.
you had mentioned.
I had not mentioned an author. The only person I think I've mentioned is I said I recommended Roya as a therapist. Is that what it was? Roya Dedo, who is a grown unschooler who has a therapy practice and of course completely understands unschooling principles. She's Pam Sarushian's eldest daughter, and she has 2 kids of her own who are awesome and unschooling. But if you were desperate for a therapist, I believe she does remote classes. Like if you really want to talk to somebody and not have to plow through explaining that you're an unschooler to the therapist whose first solution is, well, your kids should be in school so that you've got time to work on yourself. If you want to just not have to go there, someone like Roya is a good therapist. ROYA DEDEAUX.
Yeah, there's definitely an X at the end.
I know there's an X at the end, but I don't think I mentioned an author. I think I said reading science. There are a lot of authors writing about child development that don't know anything about unschooling, and yet the information is still very sound. But please remember that when you're reading studies, the vast majority of studies are done on children who are in school 6 hours a day and or their parents are planning to send them to school if they're younger, or they've been in school their whole lives. And so much of the results just don't apply in the experience of unschooling. Hello, Rachel's child.
One of the things that Robin said that kind of jumped out at me real quick is we're raising people, and then went into additional information about stuff. But the bottom line is we're raising people. We're not raising students. We're not raising kids. We're raising people. And when they get to 20, 22, 25, 30, whatever, we want to have that foundation built where when they get into a situation where they're dealing with this person who maybe is a friend, but they're not sure and they want to talk it through, we're basically, we've got their back. We're their backup. We're a sounding board that they can trust to not say, you should do it this way. You're supposed to do this.
Yeah.
But rather they can come to us and tell us stuff, and we'll say, okay, how can I help? What do you need?
Yeah.
What resources do you need? How can I help is a really good thing. Even with little kids, how can I help when they're frustrated with something? How can I help?
I fall short so often. I feel like I fell short so often. And luckily I had a good strong tower. So those few bricks that fell out, I didn't even pull them out. They just fell out on their own. My own mistakes. I've always had a group of people that I could go back to, and been given better advice from a number of people whose kids were older than mine. And that's the main thing. They were older than mine. They've been through it, and you can forgive yourself for making errors and giving bad advice sometimes. Or and you could just say, you can apologize. You can say, you know what, I gave you bad advice and I'm really sorry. Because sometimes it takes two.
I'm gonna interrupt real quick, guys. We have one more question we wanted to get to. It had some few brief statements they wanted to give at the very end. We have one more question, and it's, how do you make sure to meet legal homeschool requirements if your kid never decides that they are interested in meeting those requirements? How does one, for example, play video games or the like with one older child when one has other younger children? I'm finding it tough.
Well, that's 2 questions in one. The first question about legal homeschool requirements is that those vary by state. You must check with your statewide organization and then look for a statewide unschooling group. There's always someone who's unschooling who's connected with the statewide organizations that can help you. Here's the thing, your kid doesn't meet the legal requirements. You do. Yeah. Build a wall. Here I am doing more construction work. Build a wall between the requirements and your child's life.
Yep.
You're the one keeping the portfolio of images. You're the one writing down what they did that day. And if you're living in one of these draconian states like New York that has a shit ton of bullshit to go through, you're jumping through those hoops, not your kid.
Yeah.
There is a lot of advice about that, and I'm going to stop there because it really is very, very locally focused. The other thing is one older child, one younger child. Ooh, that's siblings. I'm going to be quiet.
There you go, Michelle. This is yours.
Well, thankfully, my teenager's at a point now where they're pretty self-sufficient, and we just, we take time to check in when I'm not occupied with the toddler, and sometimes that checking in is late at night, which is wonderful that most teenagers are night owls like myself, and we can have those conversations at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just have to also explain a limit. Like if there's something you need to do for the older child and you've been doing things with the younger child, you have to say, I'm going to need to go help, your sibling with this thing, so can we set a timer so when I'm done with that, then we can play again? Or how can I help you play, independently or watch a movie or whatever while I go take care of this other thing? And the reverse, if you have been doing things with the younger kid or the older kid, and now you got to go and get a snack for the younger one, or help them build that, tower for the 900th time, an older kid, it's the same thing. You just say, I got to go hang out, with the little one now. We can get back together later this evening. Or if you can figure out a way to make it work so that all three of you, or however many, are doing a group activity, shoot for that. Thankfully, both of my children like to play Minecraft and are pretty much capable of doing it. So sometimes that's my go-to. Let's all hang out and play Minecraft. But yeah, I think that's you just sometimes you have to explain to them, like, we've spent 3 hours together this morning, and now I need to do a little bit of focus on this other kid, and how can I help you get situated so you can hang out by yourself for a bit. There's that. I did want to say something about the legal requirement aspect of it. I think one, as your children are older, like my teenager for the most part knows everything that's required, especially since he has decided he does want to have like an official diploma for high school, and so he's aware of what what we have to produce to our evaluator and the way our system is set up. So we check in on that every now and then, and it's like, okay, so have you done this thing that you have to do to be able to get this diploma? These things add up. But younger kids, no. I definitely agree with Robin. Make that wall. That's on you. You're the legal one who's required to interpret what your child is doing into the edu-speak that people may be wanting to hear. Talk to some teachers. They will be able to coach you on how to turn bullshit into and a whole
Educationese.
Yes.
Or even find one of the homeschool groups and say, hey, I need to write something for this subject for my legalese stuff. My kid is doing these things. How does this fit here? And it does.
It does.
It fits. It's there.
If
One
you
way
need
or
someone to
another.
break it down, talk to us who have been doing it for a while.
Fortunately,
I'm in
I don't.
California. I'm in California, so all the hoops are administrative rather than academic. I mean, every now and then it's going to be like your child must take a test. So that's where you speak to your local unschooling people, and they give you all kinds of tips. And it's like sometimes it's like, you know what? Here's we need to show them that you've done this. Can I put this story you wrote into your portfolio? And you ask your kids that, or it's like, you know what? I hate to ask this of you, but we've got to hand something into the government so they leave us alone. Would you mind filling out these few things? We'll do it all together as a group, and
make a
go
party
for
of it
ice
with
cream afterwards. There you go.
Yes, absolutely. Ice cream.
So the people can understand that sometimes, being an unschooler doesn't exempt you from following laws, sadly, but children can understand that. Oh, well, so, I guess it depends on the laws.
We don't have anything.
Yeah.
In Connecticut, there is
Oh,
no
I meant
homeschooling
laws
law.
in general, not
Yeah.
homeschooling laws.
Yeah, we
Like,
don't
just
even
because you're an
have a
unschooler
homeschooling
doesn't
law.
mean you get to
So
break
that's
windows
nice.
in someone's house.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like Minecraft. That's
So
an
you break
entire.
windows at
they have
Minecraft instead. There you go.
they have literally made an entire school curriculum out of Minecraft.
Yep.
Okay, you're done.
Well, yeah, but you know what? Sometimes there still comes that can be a trap for a new unschooler, because the idea is that a curriculum is needed is the big
Right.
miss.
Right.
And
My
that's
point
the
is not that
idea
they
to get
need a
past.
curriculum, but that
Yeah.
everything that those kids are doing playing Minecraft can be fit into those boxes.
Oh,
that they
right,
want you
for
to check,
the requirements.
for what they want to see.
Ticking the boxes. Yes.
You can tick the
yes,
boxes and say,
exactly.
this is all here because you guys are doing the same thing.
I was going off on a tangent.
Yeah.
No, I know.
Well,
Yeah, so-
what happens when we
Which
get
happens.
we get to a certain age and
Oh, I'm always
I'm
been.
going to kind of bring this
Too much.
to its close, so to speak, just because Emmett would like to make a few statements before the end. I want to thank all three of you so much. I really appreciated having you guys on here and having you talk and answer everyone's questions.
and if people want to PM me on Facebook, that's fine.
Yeah.
And just
I'll
think, we didn't
Wow.
even touch on a couple of those six, which is
I know.
exactly right. That's what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Happens.
Thanks,
Well,
Again,
Rachel.
thank you so much. And I am going to pass it over to Emmett, who just had a few things to say.
Yeah, again, thank you so much to the panelists. If you are open to people contacting you and you want to drop some contact info in the chat, now would be a great time to do that if people have any other questions that didn't get answered.
Yeah, mine's at the very top of the chat.
I think mine is up.
Yeah,
mine
that's
is
actually
up
what made
there
me say that. I saw
too.
that you dropped yours.
I think I put mine there too. It's just my name.
I'm just me on
rather than-
Facebook, so
Well, I'm on Facebook all the time too.
just look me up
Yeah.
and there I am. Or you
So,
can look up my
yeah.
husband because he's on there too. So look her up. If you
You've
ever
got my husband, James Coburn. He's on there
Yeah.
as well.
Well, yeah, thank you all so much, and for being willing to do that follow-up work with people too, if anyone has any further questions. But before we wanted to wrap up, I just wanted to say this is our last program for today. We had 3 workshops today. We have 2 more tomorrow. So tomorrow we have a grown unschoolers panel and a teen unschoolers panel, which is going to be really, really exciting. And this came up in some of our other workshops as well, that sometimes people have these sort of, oh, how do they come out, or how will they be as a teenager? And this can kind of be an opportunity to go and see some real live grown unschoolers and teenage unschoolers. The grown unschoolers panel is going to be at 2 tomorrow. The teen unschoolers panel at 3. Again, we did the back-to-back thing. We'll work on that.
It'll be all right.
It'll be a little tight, but we'll get it in there. And I also just wanted to say today alone at these 3 programs, we've reached a little bit over 70 participants. Normally when we host a conference in real life, obviously, there are barriers for people to not be able to attend. And one of those barriers is the cost. So obviously making this free has made it so much more accessible to people all over the country to be able to come and share this space with us. And a really common theme among these 3 workshops today was how incredibly powerful it is to be in space with other unschoolers, right? To be able to form those connections, to hear from other people, to hear what's going on in other people's lives and what other people have done to overcome some problems that sometimes can feel really isolating, I think, as unschoolers. There can be sometimes so few of us, especially in our immediate vicinity, that really being able to have conference space to come together and share and talk and connect is so vital. And was a huge part of my life growing up as a grown unschooler. So we do also have a fundraiser that we're doing along with this programming. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to donate in order to attend. It's definitely not that. But we did inherit the conference with a good amount of debt and thought that we would be able to use this year's conference to kind of get out from underneath that. Obviously, it's not going to happen that way. So I just wanted to post the link to our fundraiser. If you do want to share it on your social media or donate, thank you so much. That would be very much appreciated. If not, again, one of the joys of being able to do this virtually is that we can make it 100% accessible. And if we do, by some miraculous thing happening, raise more than we have set as our goal, it is Rhiannon and my real goal to have a really robust scholarship fund that can not only support just waiving the conference price, but also actually allowing people to have a travel stipend, a food stipend, and a free hotel room. So that's something that we're feeling really dedicated to rolling out that program. So if we do, by some miracle, get more money than we are looking for, it's going to go straight into being able to subsidize travel and housing for people who wouldn't ordinarily be able to attend for those reasons that we know are huge barriers. Yeah, so thank you for coming in, for checking that out, and for sharing this space with us. And I hope that we'll see you throughout the rest of the month at our programming as well. I'm also going to drop here here it is, the website page for our virtual programming. So this is kind of your guidebook to the virtual conference this month. Every Saturday and Sunday, we do have programming all month. So if you want to look back in on that website, it's all updated now. There's a link to the Facebook event and a link to the Zoom ring for each event on the website. And so that's kind of your go-to hub. An important note that Robin brought up, it is all in Eastern Standard Time. The conference happens in Massachusetts, so it's all EST. Did not even occur to me when we were making it that with the reach being so much broader, it's important to put that out there. So yes, Eastern Standard Time for all of these events, all on Zoom. And thank you all so much for being here with us and sharing this space with us. And again, to the panelists for sharing all of your wonderful thoughts and wisdom and experience over the years. And thank you all for joining. And
It's good to see you, Robin.
Thank you for having me.
It's been years.
It's good to see you too, Deb and Michelle. But
Thank you, everybody.
and
Thank you.
Hey, Brenda.
ask me again next time if you wish, or not. I won't be offended.
It was wonderful. Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.